Hello, hello, and welcome to the Behaviour Pod, the one-stop shop where we talk all things behaviour. And this mini-series is all about communication. We are being joined by the amazing, wonderful, gorgeous Charlotte, who is our TBB expert when it comes to communication. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good. We are on episode 3 of this mini series. We have already got stuck into some really cool questions that we've been sent. Questions that I'm sure we've all asked ourselves at one point or another when it comes to development and communication. So, are you ready to do another one?
I am ready.
Okay. So, this one is, I think, probably one of the most common questions that I have heard in terms of parents talking to me about children who have found language a challenge. And it is simply, will my child just catch up?
Hmm. It's a great question.
Isn't
And
it?
I think that this is the one I like. I've been doing a thing recently on my social media about things like unhelpful pieces of advice that you get given, unsolicited advice that you get given. And this is something that comes up often. I think, like well-meaning friends and relatives telling you not to worry because your child is just going to catch up. So I think it's a question that lots of people have. And the reality is that some children may just catch up. We don't always know which children are going to catch up and which ones don't. But what we tend to do is we have kind of like these ages and stages or milestones, if you like, as speech language therapists. We have these in our head, and we're basically looking to see if children are following a air quote typical pattern of development. And we do know that all children develop differently. They all develop at different rates. But what we have is these milestones which tell us kind of like the majority of children what they're doing at this stage
Yeah.
or age of their development. And the reason why that's helpful is because if we notice that consistently a child isn't kind of hitting those milestones, they're following a different pattern of development, it likely suggests that they're going to need either additional support or a slightly different way of learning things. So those milestones are there and they are helpful to some extent. Now, once we've kind of identified that a child needs support, that's when I usually sort of like throw the milestones out the window a bit. Because once you've identified that a child needs help, we really want to be a bit more child-led than that and just think about what that individual child needs. But the reality is, in relation to the first question, is your child just going to catch up? Maybe. I don't know. But the truth is that when it comes to supporting children's speech and language development, a lot of the stuff that we would do to support a child is actually useful for all children anyway. There's nothing that's risky or dangerous or detrimental. It's all stuff that's going to support your child to develop their communication skills. So whether it's from like a point of being delayed or following a different pattern of development, just kind of moving forward in some way, that's only going to be a good thing for your child, right? So maybe they might catch up, but if they don't and we don't give them the support, then that is likely going to have an impact on their academic achievement, on their ability to form friendships, on their mental health and well-being. Having speech and language differences that are not well supported also can lead to things like engaging in antisocial behavior. You're more likely to end up in the like criminal justice system if you have had unsupported speech and language needs. So we don't just want to be ignoring these children or chancing it to see, because actually, even if you go on to have lifelong speech and language differences, as long as you're well supported, then the outcomes can be really good.
And I think this is so important, isn't it? The myth that children will just catch up is so. I think it as you said, it's so well meaning. It's shared with such love and compassion a lot of the time. But actually, one, I always think, my opinion is that children are always on their own journey, and it's not necessarily about them catching up to other children. It's about them being, able to communicate effectively for themselves in that moment, whatever that looks like. And as we spoke about before, with the behavior balance system and all of the approaches that we're putting in place for having that neuroaffirming culture, what we want is a varied availability when it comes to communication. As you said, it has such a vast impact. It doesn't just impact the words they use or don't use. it impacts their relationships, their ability to connect with the world. And that's such a huge human need, is to be able to have that sense of belonging, to connect, to have a clear identity, or understanding of self. And of course, when we're unable to communicate effectively, whatever that looks like, our self-esteem can be impacted, our confidence, what we put ourselves out in the world to do, will be impacted. And I think that, whether we are thinking about catching up, or whether we're thinking about just enabling our children to feel empowered in the moments that they are in, it's such a vital piece of the puzzle, isn't it? Communication.
And I think alongside that, lots of children do just have speech and language differences without having any specific diagnosis. But for some of them, they'll go on to have a diagnosis of something, whether that's developmental language disorder, or it could be part of something like autism. And actually, there's loads of evidence to show that getting the right diagnosis is also so powerful. But understanding yourself, being able to advocate for yourself, and again, thinking about your kind of emotional well-being as well. So potentially leading on to diagnosis is a really important factor there as well. I think for me, as a parent and a practitioner, I would always just rather err on the side of being proactive and weighing up the risks. It's a bit of a risk analysis here, the risks of doing something versus the risks of doing nothing. And actually, the risks of doing something and supporting speech and language development, they're not really there. There's no risk in trying to help your child with this, whereas the risks of not doing something, that they are great.
Yeah, and I think we covered this in a previous episode, but the only risk that people might think about is, well, if I offer them this, they won't use their words, or they won't do this instead. And as we said before, that's not the case. That is something that is a complete myth. It's not founded in any science and research, and it really is such an important one to overcome. And I think just talking about the fact that communication differences and having a varied option for every child is so important, because I think sometimes, particularly around for parents and not necessarily practitioners, but for parents, that idea that your child will be different is still something that can cause that element of fear, that element that there won't be acceptance, or they won't achieve what you want for them, or all of these things that we get as parents, because we want the best for our children, can sometimes actually become barriers in themselves. We can then get stuck in those negative thought loops, and it prevents us from being proactive and from putting things in place that actually would really serve our children well, and us in that moment. For us as parents, being able to hear our child and support their needs in a way that we know is what they need in that moment, it's going to feel so much better, isn't it, than trying to figure it out, trying to get.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you brought that up, actually, because I definitely wouldn't want to kind of devalue that. It is such a huge thing for a parent to notice that their child is following a different pattern of development. Often that comes with all sorts of feelings, including things like grief. So it can be a big step. And then also, if you're coming from like a cultural place, whether that's linked to your ethnicity or just, like the values of your parents and those around you, sometimes there is this stigma associated with like having a child who is following a different pattern of development. So I wouldn't want to belittle that. What I would just really encourage parents to do, and I talked about kind of being proactive, is if you've noticed a difference, try and talk to someone that you do feel comfortable talking about. Try and take a first step, be that your child's childcare provider, their school, someone who's a trusted friend, someone that you do feel like you can just talk that through with. That is a great first step. You don't have to do everything all at once. But if you can reach out to a child's school, or if you're a school and you can reach out to the parent and just start having those initial chats about what you're noticing, what your observations are, and what you think you might be able to do that might be a helpful thing for that child, I think is a really good starting point.
I think so. I think, every child is different. And I say this to parents all the time when I work with families who have more than one child, or lots and lots of children in some families, and every child is different, and every approach needs to be different, and that's okay. There is no mold for what a child should be doing. That's why I'm always like, replace your shoulds with coulds, because actually there is no one shoe fits all for every child. You know, this is why so many children find schools and that setup really difficult, because actually there's so many things that impact their communication. There's so many things that impact their behavior, impact what, you know, what their experience is. And I think that when we start to recognize the individual rather than, you know, that blanket approach, then we can really start to support them in what they need, and that just feels so much better, doesn't it? And it really does, I guess it opens the doors for our children to explore things in their own ways. Most importantly, confidently, that they're not, you know, that they're not doing something that they is an alternative. It's actually just an offering.
I think they're all such important points. And I just think, yeah, keep going back to the original question, because I know you and I, Sam, have a tendency to veer off topic, but just thinking about like that first question of like, will my child catch up? I don't know, but let's do something proactive to support them. Why not?
I love that. I love that. Meeting them where they are is always the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Meet them where they're at and see how we can work to help them progress towards whichever direction they want to be going in.
I love that. I love that. And if you are listening to this and you're already a member of the bank, then we have got so many downloadable resources that you can use to support language development and communication. Charlotte's got a whole host of videos and short courses and downloadables that you can access, whether you are in the classroom or a nursery setting. It is for all ages, the Behaviour Bank, but also that you can print out and use at home as well. So if you are thinking, oh my goodness, this sounds, yes, exactly what I needed to hear, and where do I start, sign me up, then you can access all of that over in the Behaviour Bank. And Charlotte has got her gorgeous services available outside of the bank as well. So you're not alone. is where I think, you know, we want you to come away holding that in your mind, is that you are not alone, and we are absolutely here for you with this.
I think one resource that just came to mind as you were saying that, particularly Sam, is that on the Behaviour Bank, there's one downloadable resource, which is like a checklist that can be used both by a parent or a professional. And it's like a checklist of what to do if you think that your child needs some support with their speech and language development, like a checklist of all of the different things that you can do. So that might be a useful starting point.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. That's a great list, that checklist to get stuck in with. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for all of your questions, by the way, guys. These are fantastic. I know that they are serving everyone really well in terms of being shared questions that we all experience at different times. We have come to the end of episode 3. Are we on episode 3? I'm just checking in there.
Yes.
Okay, episode 3. Because Charlotte and I could talk for so long, I have to check in. And we are going to head off and see you in episode 4, the final in our mini series this time round, all around communication. So you can find us over in the Behaviour Bank if you want some support, and you'll need to head over there if you are already a TBBer to download that checklist if you're thinking this episode is really resonating. But yes, you can find us in the best and only bank in the world when it comes to behaviour. It is your one-stop shop where you are investing time, saving energy, and your children get to profit in the future. So we will see you over in episode number 4.